Eve Lorgen is an author, hypnotherapist, and 20-year researcher in anomalous trauma, alien abductions, military abductions, mind control survivors, and paranormal experiences. She began her pioneering work while earning her master's degree in counseling psychology in 1992. Early on in her career, Eve discovered a plethora of unusual experiences that often accompanied those who reported alien encounters and MyLabs. The issue of mind control is central, and it is her belief that aliens and incorporeal beings are the master mind controllers behind the secret government, human agencies, and black projects. The most prominent aspect of Eve's consulting and support is with those who are experiencing some form of paranormal, orchestrated love relationship issues, or what she calls, quote, the love bite. Eve has authored the book, The Love Bite, Alien Interference of Human Love Relationships, and she is a contributing author to all 3 volumes of The Universal Seduction. Her new book, The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs, the Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism, was released in August of 2012. Eve's website is evelorgen.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eve Lorgen.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you here listening to me today. My topic is basically considered on the fringe of the fringe, I would say, even for this conference. But I feel that the subject matter is of utmost importance to the human race because it really deals with the human soul and the human heart and our spirituality and what is at the core that is most sacred to human beings. So really what started my work was working with people who've had alien abductions and anomalous trauma. Although before, I'll just give you a little bit of a history, before I became a master's in counseling psychology, working with people therapeutically, I was actually a research biochemist, and I worked in the biochem field for about 7 years. But I became disenchanted with that field and wanted to work more with people and their minds and understanding the alien abduction phenomena and all what surrounds that kind of experience. And through working with people and doing support groups with people in Southern California for several years, I learned that there was much more to what I call alien abductions and anomalous trauma than simple alien encounters that you might hear about in the media of how they're described. And I found that there was connections that involved occult, black magic, mind control, and paranormal kinds of interference that invaded these people's lives in ways that wasn't necessarily physical, where there was physical evidence, but there was definitely an influence going on in such a way that it affected their interpersonal lives and especially the relationships. So the first book I wrote, I'm not sure if I have a picture of the book cover. Here we go. That's the first book I wrote in 2000 called The Love Bite. And this is more about how I discovered alien abductees or people who've had multiple alien visitations in their lives and in their families came to discover that their love connections and some other types of interpersonal relationships were literally staged, orchestrated, manipulated, or influenced in some way by their alien handlers. Or in the cases of people who've had military abductions or mind control histories like ritual abuse or Illuminati bloodline families, they may be orchestrated by their handlers, whether they're alien or human or occult beings. So this was the most important thing that I felt needed to be exposed in the alien abduction genre and the UFO community like 12 years ago, 13 years ago now. And it was considered fringe even then. So as a result of working with people over, 20 years now, and since the publication of this book, I became to see a pattern emerging that was not always necessarily, quote, aliens or ETs involved in these people's relationships that were being engineered or disrupted or orchestrated. there appeared to be other entities and what I call incorporeal beings, possibly from other dimensional realities, that were interfering specifically in certain people's lives and certain bloodlines. So I'm just calling this Cupid and the Dark Cupid, and how this Dark Cupid is interfering, and how this would manifest. How would you be able to identify this if it's happening to you? Because believe me, this is not a normal kind of relationship issue. This is something that, when it happens to you, you'll know it. And it may be very confusing. So I'll just go ahead and start off by telling you a little bit about my second book, which is The Dark Side of Cupid. And the book cover is this one. And I have a table out in the room with both my books and cards, so you'll be able to identify it. Cupid has two sides. When he's good, the myth goes, he shoots the lovers with golden arrows, and they have an instant attraction and fall in love, and feels like soulmates, and everything's all wonderful. And that's what we want to believe. When we see Cupid, that's what we think. But when he's the Dark Cupid, in myth, he also has a bad side where he plays games, and he will shoot you with lead arrows. And when this happens, the couple may have an instant attraction and a lot of chemistry, but instead of things happening harmoniously, they are assailed with chaos, paranormal activity, and energy vampirism. And that's really one of the identifying factors of what I call a Dark Cupid relationship. And I also wondered, who is behind Cupid's mask? Because as I worked with people over the years, there was a certain type of report that I started getting more often than just the classic alien abductee who had engineered relationships, although that happens. So I'm thinking that Cupid really hides behind many masks, and the beings can shapeshift and give what form these people want to see and perceive. So that's why I'm not calling it all alien or all ET, because I'm not so sure it really is. Why I wrote this book? After writing The Love Bite and consulting with many people of orchestrated love relationships, I did notice a pattern emerging where a relationship where paranormal activity, disruption, interference, and energy vampirism occurred. And so what I decided to do, I wanted to make this a simple self-help relationship book so that it wasn't necessarily identified with the UFO phenomenon or alien abductions, because many people just have fear about that subject matter. The whole thing with aliens and ETs, there's automatic reject going on, and people become afraid. So my intention was to present this in a way that it's a self-help relationship book about love relationships that have an unusual signature, and what we can do about them in a way where we can recognize, identify, and resolve this, and work on healing strategies and proactive strategies, so you don't have to deal with this kind of situation. Because believe me, I've had some pretty severe cases where death ensued for one person and near death for many. So this is not a very simple love relationship thing gone wrong. When there's energy vampirism going on, this can be quite serious. So what I did is I decided to divide the signature of this kind of Dark Cupid relationship into three main parameters. And if you had two of the three parameters in your experience, then this would define the characteristic of what a Dark Cupid love bite relationship. So I defined it as the first parameter would be magical paranormal incidents that causes the lovers to believe the connection is divinely ordained. Synchronicities and omens and precognitive dreams, or mutually shared dreams, astral visitations with the lover, and it feels like soulmates. And this is what I call the magical, paranormal, supernatural aspect. And this component alone doesn't necessarily identify something that is negative or bad, because there are true cases of like soulmates where there is a powerful connection, where these magical, wonderful things happen, so it's not bad in and of itself. And what really is the identifying factors of something that is more, let's say, questionable, why it's being orchestrated, are the other two factors. And this is, the second one is emotional highs and crashing lows, extensive drama, and emotional draining that could lead to exhaustion. Either lover may feel that they are being buffeted around in a roller coaster with events out of their control, or the unconsummation dramas. Unrequited love is common. And if any of you remember the movie, what was it? The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon. That movie was actually representative of some of what I see in my work with respect to, let's say, two people are real soulmates and they want to meet in life and they may recognize one another and that they keep missing each other, and then all these strange disruptive things happen as if it's some paranormal watchers or ETs or whatever it is seems to stop them from being able to consummate the relationship or be able to meet and have a really good relationship. And that does happen, and I have seen that kind of thing in my work, where there appears to be a disruption of being able to consummate and get together something that's really wonderful and good. And of course, on the other side, there's also the dark side of a disruptive relationship where it's actually set up with a partner that really is more like a counterfeit soulmate, or they're being manipulated by either alien forces or some other paranormal force or something we don't see or understand that's unseen, but definitely felt and experienced. And then the third identifying factor of this unholy triad of the dark side of Cupid, this is the emotional manipulation and the psychopathology element. In the more severe cases that I worked with, one of the partners may be described as a type of psychopath or narcissist, or a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of character. Oftentimes this partner is overshadowed by what I call a third-party entity. And this is actually, a lot of the reports that I get is a lot like this now, instead of the classic, what I call alien love bite. And this is a little bit different. And some of the entities that people have perceived overshadowing and influencing one partner or the entire relationship could be described as the reptilian lizard type of entity, or a gargoyle type, or a demon, and they may have different masks. And this is really, the more severe cases may involve this kind of person. And I believe that I've got some alien images in here also, that some people are actually targeted, and it really depends on the situation. What I've found recently, and what I talked about in the book, that there appeared to be like 100% of the people in the book were those who wanted to expand their consciousness, become aware. They were involved with alternative media or research, spirituality, conspiracy, ufology, and they really think outside the box. And it appears that many of them are actually targeted by some kind of malevolent force to disrupt them in some way through a love relationship, especially for whistleblowers. This happens a lot with the MILABs and the super soldiers. Forces of disruption that may be carried out by black magic or technology or through aliens. So, but the lizard entity is a common report, sometimes grays, sometimes mantises. I just wanted to show a couple of pictures. One of the people in the book, in the Dark Side of Cupid, had a very severe case. She was actually a MILAB abductee, which is, I don't know if you'll know, this is my definition of a MILAB abductee, is someone who's had alien encounters throughout their life, and it's in their family line. But in addition to alien encounters, they also have the military abduction component, where they're being used as some kind of operative under mind control with alien and military technology or programs or projects. And so these people tend to be assailed with more of this kind of phenomena because they're involved in some kind of project. So oftentimes they're set up with partners that keep them under control, or I don't know why, it just happens a lot. So anyway, one of the gals in the book, I think her name is Gwen in the book, saw an entity overshadowing her partner that looked like a snake, or she called it a baby snake. And it kind of looked like what some people may describe as when there's a shape-shifting, overshadowing reptilian kind of entity. And how she observed it was almost like the kind of mirage you see in a hot desert street, where you see that kind of flowy energy coming up off the road, and it's kind of, it's not real distinct, but then you could see it overshadowing the person. And sometimes it's just the face or the head, or I've had people describe perceiving an entity momentarily overshadowing the person when they're actually having intimate relations. Or sometimes they'll see their aura change or other things, depending on the perception of the individual. One of the interesting things about working with people who've had alien visitations and NILABs and paranormal anomalous phenomena is many of them are psychic individuals who are quite perceptive and unique, very unique individuals. Another one of the people described, let me just move forward. These are some pictures that are in the book. One in particular had an experience with a man where she got involved with his religion. I'm not going to say what it is, you could read about it in the book. But once she had a sexual relationship and had an affair with this man and got involved with his religion, she started seeing certain kinds of entities show up in her life. She was a psychic anyway, but associated with this man. And there was a particular spirit that was overshadowing and appeared to control this individual, but also give him special things, like he made a pact, basically, like a black magician would. And she saw what appeared to be Mephistopheles, of the famed, Faustian bargain entity. And she described him as a troll-type spirit with a misshapen, bumpy head, a big belly, and claw-like feet, which was like the classic demon. And she also saw other entities associated with this particular man, who was a psychic vampire. And it was very traumatic for this woman, and it took her many years to heal from the relationship. I'm just going through some of the images that are in the book. One of them was like a gargoyle type of entity that overshadowed one of the woman's partners. And by the way, I just wanted to say that most of the people who come to me, I mostly got 70% were females who reported these kinds of relationships. But in reality, I believe it happens equally to men and women. And it's just that women are more likely to want to talk about relationships or describe these things. So it happens to both men and women equally. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to define, and in the book, there's the range from, let's say, mild relationship orchestration to a more severe case of, let's say, psychic vampirism, where one partner is overshadowed by a malevolent entity or full-on possession. So what we see is a range of, let's say, just a little bit of orchestration and manipulation, where it feels like, you're being staged in this reality by someone else, pulling the strings. And then there may be emotional vampirism in one of the partners, and that is a milder form. But there still may be some physical draining and exhaustion if you're around an emotional vampire. You know what I mean. It's someone who may try to involve you in their personal dramas, talk about their problems, create problems, always needing attention, that kind of thing. But the psychic vampire in the vampirism is a little bit different. It's more severe. They could engage in the same kinds of emotional drama, hooking you in behaviors, but they also have the capacity of doing what I call the psychic linking and bonding, which is much more profound when it happens to you. And it could interfere with one of your energy centers in your body, and it is distinct sensation and feeling. So in let's say the more severe psychic vampires who have an entity overshadowing them and working through them, they're able to psychically link in literally to your energy field, sometimes a particular chakra. And if you have a physical sexual relationship with those people, the psychic bond is much stronger, and it can be difficult to link and to remove. And so one of the phenomenal things that happens is when you have a relationship with someone who's, let's say, a psychic vampire, or they're being overshadowed by an entity, the telepathic linking and the psychic linking and the empathic energetic resonance between you is very strong. And with psychic vampirism, it's as if they're able to link in so powerfully that it can create a very blissful feeling, and it's almost like being under a spell, hypnotic spell. So it's blissful at the same time, but the psychic linking in is just amazing. If you've ever had it happen, you literally can be telepathic with this other individual if you've never even had this before. So I've had people report this kind of thing to me they weren't alien abductees or mill-outs or in any projects. They were normal, everyday people with no trauma in their lifetime, who just got linked in with one of these psychic vampire types of people. In one case, it's not in the book, because most of the people who come to me, they don't want to go public. They don't want to talk about it. So in order for me to even find 13 cases using pseudonyms was a great feat, let me tell you. It is not easy to do this. Sometimes with this work there comes what I call psychic attacks and harassment and all kinds of things that can be quite difficult. So I've had to learn how to deal with that in my own life. Where was I? Anyway, so what I did in the book, I decided to divide all the cases that I see into 4 basic categories to give you a flavor of the range of really what I see and the different factors involved in this. So the first type of cases, there were actually 3, what I call alien love-like cases, where they knew themselves, one partner who was the reporting partner, or both, depending on the case, knew that they had had multiple alien visitations in their lives, and probably in their family lines, because it's usually multi-generational, it goes in the bloodline. And those people knew that they were put together by the aliens that were working on their case, and they were pre-bonded in childhood. And one couple in this book, in this particular case, they definitely remembered mutually shared dream experiences of when the aliens brought them together as children to bond, so that when they met later in life, they had a profound connection, psychic linking, empathic linking, love at first sight, like they were the same soul. I mean, these kinds of connections are very powerful. And they're not unpleasant in and of itself. When you have this kind of connection, it feels like true love, feels like your soulmate. It's just, the sexual chemistry is through the roof. You can have kundalini activation. I mean, it is amazing, okay? And that's why I felt like it was important to write about it, even though it's kind of embarrassing, and most people wouldn't want to talk about the personal experiences when it comes to this kind of thing. It's usually a private thing, but I hear a lot of private stories. Okay, so the first type was more like the alien love vibe, where it feels as orchestrated by entities, but either partner is not necessarily what I call the emotional psychic vampire. They're more or less victims of having some kind of orchestrated, staged relationship set up. The second type, I think, was very interesting, because I run into a lot of this type of experience and orchestrated love connection. There was, I think, 3 cases where the reporting partner had a lover who channeled entities, or they had very powerful spirit guides that guided them in their lives that they thought were good. And the sense is that they were acting out a powerful myth, a drama orchestrated by the entities. And this is pretty amazing. They make you feel like you were, Osiris and Isis, or Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and they provide synchronicities and these phenomenal dramas that are just amazing. Paranormal activity associated with this mythic drama and channeled entities influence. In fact, in one of the people's cases, the man actually was involved in Egyptian magic and performed a love spell, which worked. And there were entities involved in the case which the woman believed were related to what they call the reptilian lizard type of fourth dimensional entity. And she believed that he was also under mind control, but also practiced black magic. Okay, so you get the sense that it's interfered with, a lot of paranormal activity, living out mythic dramas and themes, and the other person may be a host for that entity. Okay. And then this third type here, this is what is the most common of what I run into in my work with respect to the relationship manipulation. But I also work with mill-outs, super soldiers, alien abductees, and other things, but this book is really about the relationship aspect. So the third-party entities, there's a sense that the connection is set up and interfered with by a third-party entity, often hovering over the relationship, or over one of the partners who is acting as a sort of host or conduit for the entity, or acting as a portal for some kind of energy vampirism. Sometimes a third-party entity acts as a predatory kind of influence over that relationship or person. And this is more severe in terms of psychic and emotional vampirism. And then type 4, let's see. Okay, the type 4 is the severe cases. 30% of the ones in my book were people who've had the military abduction and alien abduction histories with trauma, and they did have the more severe, what I call love-bite relationships, where their partner was overshadowed and acted as a psychic vampire and a controller, or they had the psychopathic, predatory type of personality. And this kind of thing, you may notice more of the physical effects of psychic and energy vampirism. And there's definitely disruption in their lives, and sometimes physical characteristics like when you meet them, you get an instant stomach ache, or you get a headache, or maybe you feel this blissful feeling, or an early person. I mean, after meeting one of these kind of psychic vampire people, you can even start having what I call the psychic attacks or astral visitations by the entity that's actually working through, quote, the host. And that happens sometimes after you meet the person, and there will be the astral sex thing, or they will literally link into your energy body when you're sleeping in bed, and you don't even have to have physical contact with the person. In fact, some of these kinds of people, one wonders if they're human at all, or something happened to them, or something took them over, which is the hypothesis, that they can literally, even at a distance, affect your energy fields such they can affect your kundalini at a distance without even touching you. And oftentimes it is blissful. That's why it's like being under a love spell with these people. But a lot of times they're controlling predatory kinds of individuals. So that's what I see a lot, because that's why people come to me. They come because they have trauma and they want some kind of support and understanding, because they cannot understand the profundity of one of these relationships, because it is definitely off the scale of what you've experienced. And you'll know it when you feel it, when it happens to you. And so, of course, my goal was to be able to identify, recognize this in a self-help book, so that you will have solutions to this. This is not about instilling fear or calling all aliens negative. This is about how we can protect ourselves and work from our core of power, and learn what our blind spots are, so that we increase our resilience to these kinds of predatory forces that are out there working through humans or through non-human agencies. Okay, and there were variations in the book of what I call the dark side of Cupid, or love-bite kinds of relationships. And one of them is like in the movie The Adjustment Bureau, where true love is being disrupted between two people, where the aliens are trying to actually set up that couple, either partner with other partners, so that they can never really meet and consummate the true partner they're really supposed to meet later in life. And they may not find out till years later, when they finally meet, let's say their soulmate, that person is actually maybe a little bit similar to what we call the cookie cutter setup, who was a love by orchestrated partner. And it's amazing how over the years we start to see these patterns emerge. And there could be what's like a good ET, bad ET drama, where one ET, the good ET, rescues the person from the bad ET influences and helps them get in contact with their true love partner. And so there appears to be a war going on, and this is something that I noticed early on in my work with alien abductions, when people really wanted to explore their experiences, and they wanted to know what was happening, because oftentimes there's amnesia, there's trauma, and they don't always have all the memories, and that's how it is with alien abductions. Most people who haven't, they do not remember, and they think, oh, it's just a dream, it's just a little weird thing. But David Jacobs says that if there was 100% of people who've had alien abductions, only 5% are really aware that it's even happening. So there's a lot of unconscious trauma and experiences going on. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to do what I'm doing is to be able to present something in such a way that you're going to be able to identify if this is happening to you, and so you can do a deeper exploration in your own lives. Because it's not always apparent. Most people don't want to do hypnotic regressions, or maybe can even afford a therapist, or they don't have anybody to talk to. I mean, I talk to people all over the world, across the country. They don't have anyone to talk to about this stuff, even a regular therapist. And if you do, they think you're crazy, they put you on medication, or, I mean, in divorce cases, this is real difficult, where I work with people who have, let's say, an orchestrated setup, and they're married to a partner and have already had children, but they're being set up and, quote, loved with someone else, and they're having this powerful connection, and they don't know how to deal with this, and it could ruin the marriage, not only because you have a connection with someone else, but if you talked about it, you'd be accused of being crazy and get your kids taken away from you in a custody battle because you're an abductee and they think you're crazy. So many of these people's traumas have been exacerbated by the need for secrecy because we can't tell the truth. Because our society and our medical communities, academic communities, psychological communities really don't allow us true expression of what's really happening. And I am just so grateful that I met the mentors that I had when I started doing my own research. And it was Barbara Bartholek and the late Dr. Carla Turner who really inspired me in my own work with alien abductions and anomalous trauma, and to look more deeply into this from, let's say, a feminine therapist perspective instead of a scientific research perspective. And I know that the scientific research is very important, and I was involved in part of that research early on. I have articles from 1997 where I attended some of the first alien implant surgeries with Dr. Roger Lear and Daryl Sims, and interviewed the people who had real physical alien implants removed from their bodies and scientifically identified. And I did articles on the fluorescence phenomenon where it was discovered that many abductees post-abduction, if you scan yourself with a black light over your body, you may have marks that show up fluorescent in different colors, which shows where the aliens handled you or maybe branded you with some form of identification according to whatever they're using the person for. So there are physical markers, but I really believe that the love relationship and the spirituality and the soul is the core of what's most important, because our power is in our soul and in our hearts. And this is where we need to tap into in order to have power over whatever these forces are that are getting at us. Technology is wonderful, but the human soul and consciousness is the highest power that we have access to. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And in the book, of course, Barbara Bartholek, by the way, passed away in November of 2010 as a result of an accident that we believe was engineered and staged against them. Many researchers do have attempts on their lives and disruption. With Dr. Carla Turner, we believe that was the case. So Barbara, she did share some cases with me, actually way back in 1999. And at the time, they were such hardcore cases that, she didn't go public with these things because it didn't fit into the genre of what was being presented in the abduction mythology community at the time, or even now. But she saw some of the things that were the more malevolent aspects, where there was some kind of reptilian involvement, or love obsession, or channeling, which led to demonic possession kind of cases, or shadow people, or people getting involved with channeling, thinking that they were the positive ETs, and it turned out to be this malevolent or mind control experimentation on the couples involved. So I have 3 cases in my book, which are the more hardcore cases that explain and actually show that there's a connection between all those things. And that's why I don't think aliens are necessarily extraterrestrials. There are other explanations, and to be able to identify what's really happening. Okay, so I'm going to move forward here. I don't want to go too fast, but I do want to cover some of the red flags of a dark side of Cupid relationship. Let's say unnatural physical sensations in the solar plexus. Let me just go here. Am I going ahead? Let me talk about the vulnerabilities of, let's say, having one of these relationships. And believe me, this doesn't just happen to victims who don't have a handle on their process or abductees. It can happen to anyone. And it can happen to spiritually adept people who are full of light and wonderful, intelligent people. And sometimes these kinds of people are targeted because of being full of light and very aware. And I believe, after looking at this, and this happened to me, of course, this is why I'm motivated to talk about it, I believe that this is a great test of awareness and spiritual resilience. That when you have an experience like this, it's like a shamanic initiation. It could throw you to the edge of your capacity like a near-death experience, and it could profoundly change you in terms of your awareness and perception of reality. And perhaps that is the purpose, and it really depends on each individual what their purpose is in life. So the vulnerabilities really is lack of awareness that this can even happen. Lack of awareness that there's even psychic vampires or alien abductions or mind control, which is why we're here this weekend, to learn that there are things in this world that if we are aware of them, we have greater power and control in our lives. And that's what we want. We want freedom. And another one of the vulnerabilities is, of course, financial and economic burdens. When you're under stress, you're less resilient to some of these predatory forces. Lack of assertiveness. Childhood abuse and trauma can lead one to be vulnerable. Involvement with truth-seeking, paranormal, alternative research. Healing, caretaking professions. People who are just too nice, actually, like me. Alien visitations, or attracted to powerful people. And there were other things, like if you had trauma in your background, and unhealed wounds of the heart. And when we have unhealed wounds of the heart and not truly in connection with the core of our being, or the trauma or the unresolved grief, for example, can lead us to have what I call blind spots in our perception. And so the blind spots in our perception can cause us to have a relationship or be attracted to someone or not perceive on a more deep level the true nature of someone. And believe me, this is not something that is easy, okay? Because when we're dealing with some of these, what I call the psychic vampires, who are the predatory kinds of individuals, they work by deception, and there appears to be something non-human working behind them for the purpose of predation and deception. Therefore, even if you are a very aware individual, you can be subject to some of their illusions and trickery. And this is a true test of your spiritual awareness and resilience and emotional intelligence. So in 1/3 of the book, I actually give healing strategies and compassionate communication, how to communicate with each other and your partners in a way that is received without criticism and where we work from the heart and a mutual respect. And not only that, but working with paranormal intervention strategies, sometimes with hypnosis, support groups, or shamanic types of healing. Because really with this kind of situation, it borders on shamanic healing when you're dealing with a psychic vampire that will not dislink from you, and with the psychic attacks that could happen, and the consistent alien visitations, and how, if you don't want these things to happen to you, how do you stop that from happening if it's been going on in your family and in your bloodline? So I have all kinds of solutions that are on my website also. I have so much information that I would never be able to tell you all in one small talk, but if you are inclined, you can go to my website at evelorgen.com. I have a blog, and I do updates regularly. I have many radio shows that you can listen to that are already on my page, and there's just so much to this that it's absolutely amazing. But I believe that we can become very empowered, and we can stop these kinds of experiences if we understand the phenomena and know what are these access points, how are they really entering into our reality. And I think part of the problem is that we really don't understand the true nature of these beings, and that it is being presented within what I call the window dressing of extraterrestrials from other planets, where it may not exactly be that. I think that is more other dimensional than physical. Okay, so I'm going to move forward to what I call the red flags of having, let's say, a love bite or a dark side of Cupid relationship or interference. You may have unnatural sensations in the solar plexus, your heart, genitals, like the energy centers in particular, and they can be accessed even when you're not in their physical presence, by the way. And aliens can do this anyway. And I believe that after working with people for so many years, that some of the access methods that the aliens use, or perhaps even the military humans in these secret projects, that they put what I call implants in the body of the individual that may be physical, but they're not always physical. Sometimes they're like an energetic thing that the people will perceive, let's say, in their hypnotic regression and when they're doing explorations to view their energy field, they may perceive something like a hook or something in a chakra. And that these implants can act like object links for the black magician so that they have more easy access to that person remotely, like remote influencing. Okay, so another red flag would be precognitive dreams of the partner, or mutually shared dream experiences, which could suggest, by the way, which we found out in my support groups with many of the MILABs and abductees, we would have mutually shared dreams on the same nights or within 1 or 2 nights of each other, which would suggest that this is not just my dream, right? This is not just my subconscious here going on with a regular dream process. This is somehow we're being taken astrally or perhaps physically, and this is how it's remembered. And we came to find out there's group abductions, there's joint abductions, and they could use several people at the same time. They could, be programming people in these groups. So that was one of the markers. Astral sex, astral visitations of another person or an alien or an entity using your lover's image, like an incubus and a succubus kind of thing. A deep psychic connection with the person is a very powerful marker. And that in and of itself is not a bad thing, by the way. Powerful sexual chemistry with possible kundalini activation, emotional or psychic dreaming, love obsession, that's a powerful one. And of course, unrequited love or switching off of one partner after you're really hooked into them. And the feelings of being watched, almost like a Truman Show movie. That actually is a common report. And I think it's because they are. They're like in some kind of experiment or project, and they do feel like they're being watched or, something strange is going on. Okay, and so what I thought was important, of course, is intervention strategies. Working with people it's mostly counseling and support. That's what people really need, and they need others to talk about and share and understand their experience and feel like they're not crazy. Because you're not crazy when these things happen. They really do happen. Compassionate communication, which is actually based on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication methods, is a very powerful and effective way of learning how to communicate in a way where we come from the heart, we come from a very human place of understanding that each of us has feelings and that needs beneath those feelings, and we all have those and must respect that for one another and come from that place of communication. And I do some examples in the book where I do some sample dialogues of, let's say, what happened in a particular couple's case and how they dealt with it, and maybe they could have dealt with it in a better way if they knew how to communicate and they may be able to save the relationship. And so I give, examples of that, even with anomalous trauma. Okay, counseling, hypnotherapy, and grief work. I'm actually big on bereavement and grief work. After I learned about doing some grief work with people who've had family members who died of cancer, and coming to understand what bereavement and grief really is. And many people do not want to deal with feelings and want to run away from feelings or think feelings are bad. But in truth, part of who we are as humans, we are feeling beings, and our heart is very important, and our soul actually has feelings about where we are in life. And if we ran away from what our soul purpose is here, our soul, part of us, could have a lot of strong feelings about how we veered off path. So I actually work with people who go through the different levels of feelings in grief work. And as some of you may know, grief has many stages, where the first stage could be shock, numbness, denial, anger. And then you could spin in anger for years, anger and blame, and then acceptance, and then going back and forth until finally that acceptance merges into what I call the compassionate, spacious presence, who is the essence of what we really are. So in my work, I do what I call inner empathy, which is a type of work where we process with parts of ourself so that we can learn how to develop what I call the witnessing consciousness, which is really the spaciousness of compassion, which is the essence of the soul of who we really are, our divine essence. And so when we can connect with that part of us by becoming in touch with our own feelings, then we can truly be present with other people and create shifts and actually magic to happen. And this is what I call the authentic, compassionate presence, which really creates change and healing for people. And it must be true. And one of the things that was hard even in my own life was learning how to deal with all my own issues from having gone through alien abductions and trauma, and learning how to heal with that for many years until I became comfortable with the feelings that I had until it transformed into compassion and a more relaxed openness of self-acceptance and acceptance for others, because many people are in different places, and we have to respect and understand where they're at, because not everybody's willing or ready to rush forward into their traumas or even their experiences. They have to take it with what pace they're comfortable with. So I work with people, wherever they're at, I meet them where they're at, and then we move forward based on really an intuitive process. But I also do hypnotherapy and what I call liberation techniques that I learned from Dr. Corrado Malanga of Italy, who is a veteran alien abduction researcher and organic chemist. And he found ways using neurolinguistic language, archetypal language, in a guided type of visualization so that one can access the soul directly, so that deep soul connection can occur. And then with the deep soul connection, we're able to connect with that power and awareness to eliminate the interference and gain insight on why that interference is there, how it happened, who it is, to understand more deeply, on a much deeper level, why these things are happening. Another thing I'm going to talk about in the book, in some detail, of course, is about the psychic and emotional vampires, and learning how to set boundaries with these kinds of people. And that's a lesson to learn if you're a real open person and you want to take everybody at their word and think people are generally good, and people generally are good, but some people are very manipulative, and one must learn how to set appropriate boundaries. And of course, proactive strategies. I'm big on proactive strategies. And that is really building our spiritual immune system and what I call emotional intelligence. And I think as someone who was in the scientific world for so long, and also in the patriarchal world, there are things in this culture that we take as acceptance. 5 minutes, okay. Anyway, that technology and science and the left brain mode of being is more important and has more validity. But in truth, the right side of the brain, the more feminine aspect, the spiritual aspect, and emotional aspect of our being is equally important and valuable. And so some of the proactive strategies of building that immune system would be, the body-mind connecting exercises like yoga, tai chi, dancing, singing, martial arts, meditation, and mindfulness. And I really stress doing things that create joy in your life, like joyfulness activities, singing, kirtan, dancing, drumming, gospel music, being in nature, and community building, generosity, prayer, and also what I call rejoicing in the good deeds of others, so that you keep yourself uplifted for the benefit of all beings, and to always consider, how can I benefit the world? How can I benefit others? How can I bring someone to a higher awareness in a way that's going to benefit them and everyone else? And that helps, beef up your resilience to some of these dark forces. Because many people are under a lot of stress nowadays, believe me, it's not easy. And lastly, of course, can a light side of Cupid happen? And I say yes, yes, yes. I do cover some of these ideas on real soulmates versus false ones, and how to tell the difference. because one of these love bite things could really throw you off and think you've met your soulmate. And it's really amazing to think, wow, how can these beings do this at such a level of interference? It's scary to think about, but there are real soulmates, there are real wonderful connections, and they do happen. And I'd say that spiritual maturity is a factor, and integrated wholeness will help you to find what that true love connection is. And true soulmates, of course, do not vampirize. Healthy relationships are mutual in giving and receiving, and with lots of respect. So actually, I'll finish it off like that. And if you want to look at some alien images, I could flip through some real quick. If you want to look at some, that's a common. The reptilian on the right and the left are some MILAB reports. I don't know if I have time to go through them. Some of the bird-like images, the Orus Ra entity, the insectoids, sort of Nordic types, shadow people, and then, some people do have benevolent encounters with other beings, so it really depends on your experience. And all I say is that really, check the fruit on the tree and what's your intentions, and just to try to keep this positive intention in your heart, and then you will know, your soul knows and your heart knows, and that's what to connect with. So I guess I will sign off with that.